Item 7, public hearings, appeals, presentations, recognitions, and awards. Item 7A, presentation, discussion of newly enacted state statutes governing the sale and possession of beer, wine, and spirits. Trevor.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. If we could go ahead and start the presentation. We prepared a brief slideshow to update the Council and staff on State Question 792. As everyone knows, in 2016, the Oklahoma voters passed State Question 792 that amended Oklahoma's Constitution and modernized its liquor laws. To have a complete understanding of the modernization and the laws that have been changed, a brief review of the history is in order. When Oklahoma entered the Union in 1907, the Constitution actually provided for the state to be a prohibition state. So alcohol was not allowed. That changed in 1933 when low point beer, or 3.2% alcohol by weight beer, was allowed in the state. And that was basically the regulations until 1959 when prohibition was repealed statewide. That same regulatory scheme was in place until 1984 when liquor by the drink was adopted. And then in 2016, we have State Question 792, which in essence changed the entire regulatory scheme. I actually printed off all the new laws. They take up a binder that's about 6 inches. And so you'll be happy to know that I'm not going to go through each and every one of those statutes.
Thank you.
But what I'd like to do is go through some of the highlights specifically as it's going to affect the city of Broken Arrow. That's going to include the different licensing changes that the states have made, also the occupational taxes that the city may collect. There's a new requirement for certificates of compliances to be issued by the city that we're going to go over. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about some of the law enforcement effects that might be impacted when this goes into effect on October 1st. So hopefully my slideshow will work, and let's go to the first issue, which is the licensing. So one of the first changes that you're going to see is in the types of alcohol that you're going to see at the purchase package stores. So places like a Quick Trip or a Come and Go, convenience stores, also the Walmarts, the Targets, they can apply to ABLE for a retail wine license and also a retail beer license. What they'll be able to do with those licenses is sell wine with up to 15% alcohol by volume, and also what's been commonly referred to in Oklahoma as high point beer. And that's beer that's above 8.99%, as opposed to low point beer, which was the 3.2%. So if you go into anything other than a liquor store today, basically you'll see the 3.2% beer. That's going to change if those businesses get wine or beer licenses so that they can have the wine or the high point beer. So what about liquor stores? Well, you're also going to see changes in liquor stores. So today, if you go into a liquor store, you're not going to see anything that's been refrigerated. You're not going to see anything for sale other than alcohol. And you're not going to, for example, you won't see lottery tickets, tobacco, Tylenol, things of that nature. The updated alcohol laws allow the liquor stores to sell a certain percent of their gross monthly sales of 20% for items other than the alcohol. They're also able to refrigerate their beer and the wine. They'll also be able to sell spirits. One of the things that the package stores will not be able to do is to sell the spirits. So that will still be limited to the liquor stores. You also are going to see license changes for wineries. So my understanding is wineries currently cannot sell wine for on-premises consumption or give free samples. That's going to change. So wineries can now sell for on and off-premises consumption. They're also able to give out free samples of wine to their customers and now be able to sell at festivals and trade shows. So those are the main types of licenses that businesses will get from ABLE. And you'll see how the city regulatory scheme works in a moment. Before we move on, the other licenses that you can have are for breweries, brew pubs, and then like we've already talked about the wineries. So in essence, you'll be able to have breweries and brew pubs that can sell alcohol on their premise. They'll also have the option to have other hours of operation. So for example, currently the opening times are from 10 a.m. I think to 2 a.m. and the hours will now be moved back to 8 o'clock for breweries, brew pubs, and wineries. One of the other changes that they've made for municipalities is they've allowed the cities to actually close any licensee between the hours of 2 a.m. and 6 a.m., meaning they're not able to sell alcohol already, but if they had breakfast specials or food or other things of that nature, municipalities will actually be empowered to close those businesses if they choose to do so between the hours of 2 and 6 a.m. So what does this mean for the city in terms of revenue? So with the different licensing, there's going to be occupational taxes that are be associated with each one. So keep in mind that each of those licenses that we've went over will be issued by ABLE. And so the ABLE Commission at the state level will evaluate their applications, and they'll be the ones to determine if they're entitled to those licenses or not. If they do, there'll be certain state charges that will be authorized to be collected by the state. Now, what the statute says is the city is also authorized to collect the exact same amount of tax, it's occupational tax, for each one of those licensees. And so it has to follow the state law on what the amounts are. And that's what this updated occupational tax ordinance will do, is each one of those numbers, 1 through 22, tracks specifically the state law on the fees that ABLE can collect, which also allows us to collect on an annual basis. And you'll see that there are some new licensees on there. So some of the amounts had changed. For example, the annual special event fee had gone to $55 from $50. There's also provisions there for Oklahoma brewer for $125 and things of that nature. So this will allow the city to collect an occupational tax that is in line with what ABLE collects is for the licensing. One of the other provisions is that that political subdivisions, such as the city of Broken Arrow, are not allowed to participate in any phase of the alcoholic beverage business that includes manufacture, sale, or transportation. One of the questions that had come up is, well, how will we continue to operate the Battle Creek Golf Course or things of that nature? And one of the solutions that's been proposed by the Oklahoma Municipal League is you contract that out and you have a third party who is licensed by the state conduct any of the sales that the city would like to see done. But again, the city cannot participate in that directly. An additional area of the city's involvement is going to be the certificate of compliance requests. So basically, when a business wants to be licensed by ABLE, they will first come to the city and they will apply for a certificate of compliance. And the certificate of compliance application is on the left. We've already prepared one, is my understanding from Development Services. I think we've accepted or we've reviewed approximately 52 or 53 applications to date, and more are still coming. I see Mr. Skates nodding his head, so I think I got that number right. So what the compliance application process does is it allows the municipality to confirm that the licensee that's going to ABLE for the license has complied with all city fire codes, zoning codes, and other regulations. So it streamlines the process. So basically the process will be the licensee will come to the municipality, they'll fill out their application, we'll conduct any inspections that will be necessary, for example, that they're in compliance with the fire code, that their zoning is appropriate, things of that nature. And if they meet all of our requirements, we can then issue a certificate of compliance, which is on the right, and that gets submitted to ABLE with their application for their license, whether it is a retail license or a wine license or a liquor store license. And the history that I gave was to point out, and I covered this a little bit, but the alcohol laws in Oklahoma were divided between the regulation of intoxicating beverages and low point beer. And so if you looked at the statutes before this latest update, you would see that they were regulated separately. So you'd have regulations concerning intoxicating beverages that would not apply to low point beer. and vice versa. That's been eliminated. Now there's only what they call alcoholic beverages, and so it's regulated the same, whether it's what you call low point beer, high point beer, wine, or spirits. The definition is the same. So one of the things we'll need to do as a city, and that we are doing, is we're updating Chapter 4 of our ordinances to remove any reference to low point beer and the regulations of the low point beer. An additional change that may come about, and this is going to be up to each of the counties to decide, is right now Sunday sales are not allowed, but each of the county commissioners are empowered to set an election date for a vote of the will of the people. And if that is set and the election passes, on a county by county basis, you could have Sunday sales of alcohol. And then finally, talking about enforcement and law enforcement issues, none of the major laws involving alcohol in terms of being able to consume alcohol if you're under the age of 21 will change. Also, public intoxication, those laws will not change. One area that will change, though, is at the state level, you have prohibited acts for alcohol. And one of those prohibited acts used to be under Section 8 there. It previously said no person shall consume intoxicating beverages. Now it reads spirits. And that's a significant change, because if you look at the definition of spirits under the new law, it excludes beer and wine from the definition. So as a result of the definitions that they're using, as of October 1st, it will be against the law to consume spirits in public at the state level, but it will not, at least from the research that I've gotten to date, be against the law to consume beer or wine in public. And that was a result of the change that they had made under the definition of the prohibited acts. So right now, ABLE is still considering and passing emergency rules. As a matter of fact, this afternoon I had an opportunity to go to the Tulsa County Fairgrounds, and with the Restaurant Association, they had two ABLE officers there that gave a presentation on licensing and employment work and working with ABLE. We also are having some ABLE officers come and update the city in September. So this is still progressing and it's evolving, but I feel like we have a good handle on the changes that we need to make to our ordinances. It's anticipated we'll have preview ordinances at the next council meeting for your consideration. But at this time, we just wanted to update you on the major changes that were coming, how they would affect the city, and answer any questions that, as I might be able to.
I have just a quick question. So the Rose District is considered an arts and entertainment district, and right now you can walk around with Low Point, and since there won't be Low Point anymore, all beer is the same, are people able to walk around with any beer now? Is that what this is saying? And wine? Because there was a time you couldn't even go into a store with wine or walk on the street with wine. It was only Low Point beer.
Right. My understanding and my best opinion at this point with what I've reviewed is it only is a ban on the spirits. So you would be able to have, there's not going to be a legal definition of Low Point and High Point beer. It's just alcoholic beverage.
Okay.
It's in that sense. So you would be able to have wine up to 15%, beer up to 8.99%. It's my understanding from ABLE there are some beers, I think, that may exceed that amount, or fortified wines, things of that nature that wouldn't be allowed. But otherwise...
But there's no one going to be walking around testing, though.
I won't have a hydrometer or whatever it is you use to test that. That's a good question.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask the question, and it might not apply to here, but some of this beer, the new beer that they're making locally, I know I saw it first in Oklahoma City and in Tulsa, now here. Does that have a different alcohol content than the beer that we're talking about here?
So it would be definitely different from what you're used to of getting at a Quick Trip today. And so my understanding is when they measure that alcohol by volume, it's 3.2%, which is, I think, would be about 4% of actual alcohol in the drink. The microbreweries, I believe, can get a stronger amount of alcohol, and I don't know if I'm not a brewer, so I can't tell you the technical details.
Right.
But they can get it stronger. Like I said, I know at least 8.9%. I think they have some types of sour beers that they call it that can get up to maybe 10%. So they can make a stronger drink.
So legally, they can actually get stronger than what our beer you'd find in a liquor store now.
I'm not certain about that. I know Able will be regulating that issue, so I'm not comfortable saying. I'd have to defer to Able's decision on that.
Okay.
So do establishments that currently don't have a convenience store that can sell higher point beer, let's just say Quick Trip or Come and Go, do they have to have multiple licenses for each location from Able? And do those have to be viewable to the public, those licenses?
So the answer to your first question is, my understanding is they need to have a license per outlet. So it's for the physical location.
Okay.
That's selling, whether it's the retail wine, retail beer, or if it's a liquor store. One of the changes with the liquor stores is they can have 2 locations that previously were limited to 1. I believe they can have 2. I'm not certain about the public view of the license. I'd have to ask Able that question.
Okay. And I think you said something about spirits or hard liquors can't be consumed in public.
Correct.
So if you're at a restaurant in downtown Broken Arrow and you're sitting outside and want a mixed drink, can you not have it outside?
You can if you're still on the premises of the licensed retailer. So as long as you've not left the premises, and some of the premises, for example, I know Main Street Tavern, their premise is included in part of what you consider outside on the sidewalk. So you would be able to consume that beverage with the spirits if you're on their premises. You wouldn't be able to walk in to a licensed a bar, like you couldn't walk into the tavern, get an alcoholic drink, and then walk out, even if it was wine or beer, because it's only for on-premises consumption.
All right, thank you.
Any more questions? Thank you, Trevor.
Thank you.